Another approach. Good evening, everybody. And I think this is episode 17, or it's episode 2 of season 2 or something. But what it definitely is, it's around 5 o'clock Pacific time, which can only mean one thing. And that is that it's time for us to head out in the yard. As many of you know, the yard is a production of Commissary Club. Commissary Club is a new app, a new social app. It's the first social app for 70 million Americans who have a criminal record. My name is Richard Bronson. I am the founder and CEO of Commissary Club, as well as 70 Million Jobs, a company I launched three and a half years ago as the first national for-profit employment platform for folks with records. And I'm very proud of the fact that we've helped thousands of deserving men and women land employment. As always, I am honored and thrilled to be joined by two of my dear friends and teammates. Number one, we have the big man, ex-NBA center on the LA Lakers, no less, Mr. Seth Sundberg. Hey, Seth, how are you?
What's up, man? That is like my weekly flashback. It's becoming the part of my favorite part of the week, I think.
I know, you're reliving your glory days. You know, remember those
crowds?
Do you know remember those kids from high school who, like, you know, you just had the feeling that these are going to be the best years of their life, and it's all downhill from, you know, now they're like, they have a delivery route for Budweiser, but then they were like big man on campus dating the captain of the cheerleading team.
Hot chick.
So that's kind of, you remind me of in a way, Seth. But anyway, joining Seth and I is another dear friend. He is a rap artist extraordinaire and an entrepreneur to the stars, and his name is Divine. D, how are you, sir?
Great to be here, Rich. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us once again, D. The three of us work together along with the very able Adrian Hatter, who sort of runs things behind the scenes and is arguably the brains of the organization. Divine, Seth, and I have done time. Adrian, much to her credit, has never done any time, but she's young. Before we get started, I just want to share a couple of little housekeeping items, and then we're going to introduce our really great guest in a moment. On the yard, our goal is, like it is on Commissary Club, our goal is to connect people in the broadest sense. And we hope that by connecting one another, folks with records particularly, out of that will come friendship. Out of that will emerge role models, even inspiration. And we also, parenthetically, are very eager that people who are viewing who don't directly have experience behind bars, that they are able to recognize the undeniable humanity, you know, that our guests have, and us, our hosts as well, hopefully. That we ultimately are all connected and not that very different from one another. Our goal is for you to experience as much as possible and gain insight into what it is to be incarcerated. What's that experience all about? We believe that if you do have a heightened awareness of it, that ultimately, inevitably, the world is going to be a better place with that understanding. We take you out to the yard, figuratively. The yard is a place in a prison or a jail where people, inmates, have the opportunity to connect and share and laugh and yell and argue, and sometimes share tragedy too. But, you know, crying is to be avoided at all costs on the yard. Crying is a sign of weakness, and in prison, signs of weaknesses don't go over well. We would like everybody, if you have questions or comments, that you please utilize the chat button at the bottom of the screen and say what's ever on your mind or ask the questions, and we try to get to as many as we can over the next 90 minutes. We also ask that you sort of stay on the theme or the approach that we're trying to work with here. It's certainly important to understand how people end up in prison. And it's certainly important to understand what happens when they leave prison. But for the sake of our 90 minutes, our little slice of the pie here, we're focused on the in-prison experience. So if you have comments or questions, please try as much as possible to remain focused on what it's like to be in prison. And that may be your own experience when you were there, when you were down, or questions about it. So please focus on that. If you have something to say or would like to join the conversation, from time to time, we will bring in guests from our audience. And if you'd like to hang out with us, message Adrienne, and she'll see if she can make that happen. So that's getting all that stuff out of the way. Thank you for bearing with it. We do an exercise that we've done every time on the yard, and we're going to do it again tonight. And I ask everybody to sort of just act on faith and trust me as we go through this. First, please just everybody just take a deep breath. Okay, let it out slowly. And then having done that, please everybody just close your eyes. Close your eyes and just sort of let your mind wander for a moment. I would like you to imagine, if you will, and this is probably very applicable for a bunch of people who are listening right now. Let's imagine that you own a business. It's not a huge business, but it's a nice business. And this business has been around for a while, and it provides you and your family with a very nice lifestyle. You know, in general, life is pretty good. And, you know, something, you're smart enough to acknowledge that every day. Thank God everybody's healthy, you're paying the bills, you're putting away money, your kids are going to go to college. You know, things could be worse. You also, one of your hobbies, you're a foodie. You love, you know, to experiment and go out to all the latest restaurants when they open, you know, and now that things are starting to settle down in the world, you're looking forward to doing that again with your friends. You love nothing more than calling up your friends and talking about a new restaurant that's just open and, you know, let's go check it out. So you go out a lot. And inevitably, when that bill comes, you're the guy or you're the woman who grabs for it. Because, well, life is good and why shouldn't you? Now, once a quarter, because you're a responsible business person, you meet with your accountant and you go over your business, you go over your personal finances. And your accountant insists that you maintain and provide all of your business receipts that you've accumulated through that quarter. Because, of course, you want to make sure that you're able to write off as many business expenses as you can. I mean, that's naturally what you do in business. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, as you put together these receipts quarterly, you know, of course, you're going to throw in a couple of personal dinners with your friends that you paid for. You know, maybe you took the family on a family trip. You're going to throw in those receipts as well, you know, and for this, you know, for the sake of, you know, your records, you're going to call that a business trip, right? Nothing really wrong there. I mean, it's something everybody does. I mean, even your accountant told you, you know, the way to look at this is one for them, meaning the IRS, one for you. Except this year, something unexpected happens. You received a letter from the IRS. And you never got one before. It seems that as part of their routine monitoring of your account, they discovered a couple of things that they need some explanations for. They have some questions regarding specifically these business expenses. And for the first time ever, you're going to be audited. Now, not only does it turn out that they're interested in your business expenses, but they're also looking at that building that you had acquired in the past year. And they're looking specifically at your bank loan application. Now, you never thought anybody would ever be looking at that, right? That's something that's going to get buried, and whatever you wrote there, you can barely even remember it. But the problem is that on that bank loan application for that building you bought, you fudged a couple of the numbers. You fudged the numbers because it would have worked out better for you. And you're thinking fudging numbers. I mean, just the word fudging, how bad could that possibly be? It's about fudging, for God's sakes. Well, this IRS doesn't quite think of it as fudging. He thinks that there's a problem. And really, very, very quickly, everything in your life pretty much goes south from there, because now you have all kinds of problems with the IRS. Now, fast forward to 2 years later, and you're aware that you just woke up from your sleep. And you look up and you look across and you notice you're lying in a cot, and that in front of you, there are bars on the door. That's right, you're in a prison cell. And you notice that your head, where you were sleeping, is right next to a stainless steel toilet, which is attached to your sink. It's not 6 inches away. And right next to you, another 6 inches on the other side, there's another cot where there's another person sleeping who's also just waking up, except this person is coughing and wheezing for air. And it occurs to you, holy shit, not only am I in prison, but I'm in prison in a cell with somebody who maybe, just maybe, has contracted the coronavirus and is experiencing distress through that. And you realize you're in prison for tax fraud and you're going to be there for another 3 years. All right. Now, once a day, you know, and you look forward to it every day, they let you out onto the prison yard. And the prison yard is this big, flat, empty space. And on the prison yard, it's outdoors. And if you want, you can toss around a football or kick a ball. You can work out. Or what you'll probably do, which is what you've done every day since you've been in prison, and probably what you're going to do for the next 3 years, is you're going to find your friends and you're going to get together with them and kick it like you have and like friends do whenever they get together. And these are very special moments for you, because if only for a few minutes that you're out on the yard breathing the fresh air, for those few minutes, you're not just a number in prison. You're not an animal like you're frequently treated there, but in fact, you are what you are, which is a human being. And you're a human being just like that time before that IRS audit began, when your life spiraled out of control. And you can make believe once again that you have a life. So I'm going to take you out onto the yard right now. And I want you to meet somebody on the yard who's a friend, who is a pretty interesting guy, and who you're going to like. His name is Mike Santos. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me on the yard.
Thank you for joining us. Mike, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then you can fill in the details. Mike, back in the day, was a coke dealer. He was arrested for selling drugs. And unlike most people, Mike chose to take his case to trial, where unfortunately he lost. And Mike was sentenced by the judge to a 45-year sentence. 45 years. He ended up serving 26 years of his sentence. And he served these 26 years in, get this, 19 different prisons. 19 prisons he was sent to, including the infamous US maximum security prison in Atlanta, one of the worst places on earth. Now, just to give you a little context here, his partner, he had a partner in his coke business. His partner copped a plea. His partner cooperated with the government, and instead of getting a 45-year sentence like Mike got, he got a 4-year sentence and ended up serving just a little more than 2 years. Now, like a lot of inmates facing long sentences, Mike set ambitious goals for himself. His goals were to educate himself, to find mentors to help him when he got out, and to find ways to help society, to do the right thing. He met those goals and then some. While in prison, get this, he received a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and was on his way to receiving a doctorate when the Department of Prisons said, enough with the education. Since he's been out, he's been involved with lecturing at universities, including Stanford. He provides support services to people about to enter prison and upon their release. He's a pretty amazing guy, what he's done with his life, but we'll let him tell the rest of the story. Mike, again, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for bringing me back to the yard, but through this indirect way, because I did spend enough time on those prison yards, and it's good to be here doing it by video. I see some names that I recognize. Dirk Van Velzen there. I've spoken with him a few times and met him at a few conferences, so it's super cool to see what you guys are putting together. And I'm just and I know Seth. I've known his entrepreneurial visions since he's come home. So and of course I've spoken with you, Mr. Bronson, and just happy to be connected.
First of all, ain't no Mr. Bronson's on the yard, man. This is this is the way it is on the yard, man. It's great.
It's the wolf, man. It's the wolf.
All right. But enough of me. Let's first, I got to find out, because I've heard such things about this Max facility in Atlanta. Mike, was it as bad as everybody talks about it to be?
Prison's prison, dude. I mean, really, I was in every security level and I didn't know any different. So it was just prison to me when I got there. I was 23 years old and there had just been a riot from the Cuban Marilitos had come in. There'd just been a riot there. So when I got there, it was in a transition because they were rebuilding the whole institution. So I didn't really understand. I'd been in jail already for a year in pretrial. So I was going through trial and facing life without parole and didn't know what was coming down. But you're learning about things. And I went to trial in Seattle. So I got shipped to Atlanta because at that time, back in the mid 1980s, there was a whole different sentencing law. It was called the old law. And the old law had parole eligibility for some people. I was not, because I was charged with being what's called an 848, and an 848 has no parole eligibility. So I don't know what's really going down, but when I pull up in that bus and I see that 40-foot wall, around a penitentiary with barbed wire, and it looks like, medieval place. I mean, it's the second oldest prison in the federal system. Started with Leavenworth, then there was USP Atlanta. So I got there and I just didn't know any better. So when you don't know any better, it's just prison. And you get there and it's certainly this old decrepit. It's built in 1900. I think 1901 it opened. So it's old, but I don't know any better. And I adjusted, and I was fortunate to meet some guys there that I knew was connected to from my previous whatever I was doing. And so it was a little easier because they could open some doors and ease some ways for me. And I got through it really fortunately, because at the time, Atlanta became the most violent federal penitentiary in the nation at that time, a couple of years later. But when I was there, I would have to say it was as easy as it could be for a penitentiary, because I've been to penitentiaries and they're really volatile, but it was okay for me. I mean, I think it's all what we make of it. I mean, I just had that experience in every institution. Yeah. It's all about mindset. It's all about how you're feeling and what you're doing and how you interact. People are people, and it can be dangerous. But if you sit in that prison and you say, I got to understand this environment and the people around me, and I got to respect that, there's people from every different background. I've got to learn to navigate these treacherous waters. And I learned that, and I got through 8 years in a high security penitentiary without a single altercation. So, I hear people complain, but I can tell you something else. when I went to minimum security camps, I hear people complaining about that. So, people cry in prison. That's the way it goes. And I'll tell you
What the baby's
story.
gonna
Now that
do?
I remember,
What the baby's gonna do?
I'll tell you a funny story. So we're in the commissary there on the yard in penitentiary, and some dude says, he came from Leavenworth. There was a riot at Leavenworth, and whenever there'd be a riot in one of the other prisons, they just kind of shuffle zip codes. And so this dude came to the place. I don't know if he was a Lewisburg or Leavenworth. There were only about 5 penitentiaries at that time. This is the late 1980s. And he's in the yard, and he says, "Man, people ain't no respect here. Back, what was it? He said, people, there's no respect here. Back in Leavenworth, this would never happen to me." And I wasn't an altercation type of a guy, but the guy I was with was. And he looked at the dude and he said, "So what happened? They checked your balls when you came in here at the USB Atlanta?" He said, "If you had respect up there in Lewisburg, then get it right here. Do what you got to do." The reality is, in the penitentiary, people can be what they want to be, right? But if you're cool, you get by. And I was blessed to have gotten by 9,500 days in prison with a pretty easy ride.
Jesus. So people, typically conflate all different, jails and prisons are all the same, and all levels of security are the same. Of course, that's completely not true. There is levels, behind the wall is called, where, there are these 40 feet brick walls, and there are guards and turrets with shotguns. And then there are places in camps where if you wanted to walk off, you could do that too. You're going to get caught, and then they'll send you one of the bad places. So, but you were at a place first where there were guards manning turrets, right? With shotguns or rifles in their hand, right?
Yeah, there were, I think, there were quite a few towers all around the yard. Well, all around first there's the 40-foot wall, then interspersed through the wall, there are these towers, and there are guards walking around the towers with their guns. And if you get too close to the wall, they'll fire.
Did you ever see that happen?
Yeah. But in addition to that, you've got these wires going across the wall so helicopters can't come in.
The wires, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was in a prison like that because they had some Colombian drug lord had arranged to have a helicopter come down and pull them up. So they have these electrified grid systems above them that can happen. But how did it feel? You walk out onto the yard and you look up and there are guys who are holding shotguns. I mean, that had to be pretty chilling, right? Or did you get used to it?
I guess I just didn't know any better, because at the start, remember, I'd never been in custody before. So I didn't know what to expect. I was in a jail, which there was no yard for a year. And during that year, I spent a good portion of that year thinking I was going to get out by prevailing in trial. Instead, I got convicted of every count. And then I was led to believe I could potentially face life in prison without parole. And then I got 45 years. It felt like, okay, there's an end game here. And then I had confidence that I'd be able to get out of that. I didn't know what it meant, because I didn't know what good time meant. I didn't know anything. I knew I wouldn't have parole, but I didn't understand good time because I was so new, right? And I was in a county jail. So by the time I got to the penitentiary and I got to the yard, sure, there were gun towers, but I kind of expected that because this was before mass incarceration really took off. And when I went to prison, there were about 30,000 people in federal prison. So there were only 5 penitentiaries. It was much smaller, population-wise. So I was learning as I went, and I'm listening to guys that were there, and most of them had parole. So you could have life sentence, but they might get out parole in 10 years. They might get parole in 12 years, 9 years, things of that sort. So it was a different mentality at that time. People had an incentive to kind of want to go home. Right. So it was different from today when they switched to the new law and they ripped that incentive away and went from a indeterminate sentencing to determinate sentencing, made a big difference. But I knew I didn't have parole. So I just had to learn to live with it. And I loved being outside. And we had a lot more liberty in the mid 1980s in prison than you would have today. Like we could go to the yard a lot. And, you need a pass. I had to go through like 7 gates to get to the yard, but had to get a pass and go through 7 gates to get through yard, and sometimes get strip searched on the way to the yard or on the way back. But it was cool. I loved being outside.
Did you have weights on at Atlanta?
Better than Gold's Gym, buddy. We had outdoor weights. We had indoor. There was a riot, remember? So they burned down the gym. Yeah. But then they built this extraordinary gym. It opened probably in like 1990 or something. But the first couple of years was just an outdoor gym, one under a canopy, and then one outside. But all kinds of weights, squat machines, Smith machines, everything. Yeah. So I was really into weight training at that era, as most young men are.
It's way better than the water bags from jail, right?
Yeah, the jail. Yeah.
Why don't you explain that, Seth?
What a water bag is? Yeah, I mean, everybody that's been down knows what a water bag is, but it's when you don't have anything heavy to lift, and usually it's in jail. Although we had to do it at the camp because we didn't have weights at the camp either. They took all the weights away. I was down from 2009 to 2014, and
they took all the weights. They took the weights out by that time.
They built a new camp or a new facility, they didn't put weights in it. So, but if you didn't have that, you would. Guys get creative, right? You just start putting other dudes on your shoulder and doing some squats, and now you got a squat rack, a human squat rack. And the water bag was, something that we did because like you fill literally a garbage bag up and then wrap it in a laundry bag net and start to fill it up with water and start lifting it because it's heavy, and hope it doesn't bust.
Mike, you were in 19 different facilities.
Yeah. So
how did that happen?
So that's, I don't know where you got that, probably some book I wrote or something, but I was in 19 facilities, but that's facilities. That's really not accurate to say prisons. So I started, let's just name them, right? Let's do the.
No. Let's not do that.
I started in jails, right? Series of jails. Then the first prison was USP Atlanta. Then I went after 8 years to a medium security. But to get to a medium security, you got to go through Atlanta, Oklahoma, Lewisburg.
Holdovers, all the holdovers.
Yeah, and then you get there. So you're there. So you're counting them. For
the benefit of those of us who I have, as I know Divine and Seth have as well. But explain, people complain about travel, right? And they complain, they hate the airlines, they hate this.
Try Con Air.
Talk about Con Air and what it's like to travel on the government's dime. Explain that.
So it's probably some of the worst time in prison because you're really around a lot of uncertainty and a lot of transient people. Now, I've got a funny story that I love to tell about transit at the end of my journey, and I'll get there. But in the beginning, it's traumatic because you don't understand. You're locked with a chain around your waist. Your wrists are chained to the waist chain. You've got shackles on your leg. You don't have socks, so it's digging into your ankles, and there is this dehumanizing experience where a guard is, causing you to open your mouth. And it goes through a series of problems, of traumatic events. And because you're going from a lot of times one institution to another, you've got these transient stops at holdover facilities. And when you're in those holdover facilities, you don't know how long you're going to be there. So every day you're in there, the guards will come coming through the cell house at 1 a.m, and you hear the chains dragging, and you're waking up. You can't sleep because you're just hoping, are you going to take me on the chain? Are you going to get me out? Am I going to go? So you don't sleep, and then you don't go, and then you're kind of just sad because man, I got to get through this another day. And sometimes you're there for 30 days. But that's only part of it. The other part is they are sometimes coming by your cell and they're taking your cellmate out, and that means somebody else they're putting in there. And you don't ever know who that's going to be. You know nothing about their background. You don't know anything about who they are, and they don't know anything about you. So there's always a test, right? And I'm not going to say, regardless of how long I was in, there's some fear because I'm going into a cell. I don't know who's this person I'm sharing a cell with, but I know I got a 45-year sentence. So I know that is what they're going to look at when they classify me. So I don't know where I'm going. And this gets me to the funny story at the end of my journey. So I was really a prolific writer in prison. And by the time I was in my, 20th year, 18th year, something like that, 17th year, I'd done a lot in prison. So I knew people in every prison because by then I'd been in high security penitentiaries, medium security FCIs, low security prisons. And that was, so I got out after 26 years. So I was in my 16th or 17th year. And I'm in the visiting room. I got married in prison. I'm in the visiting room with my wife. Santos! They call me. And they call me up to the thing. And the visiting room, I didn't do anything. Cuff up, So I don't know what's going on. I've been in jail for 16 plus years. They lock me up, take me to the SHU. I have no idea what's going on. Next day, I'm saying, what's up? It's Thanksgiving. It's getting close to the holidays. So what's up? They said, you're being transferred. I said, fuck, I don't know where I'm going. I'm cool where I'm at. I've been there for 8 years. I'm in Fort Dix, New Jersey. It's a low security prison. I just got to my 10th. I below my 10th year divine. And they say, cuff up. And I don't know where I'm going. So the first thing that happens is they take you to lieutenant's office, right? Before they take you to the SHU. You know why you're here? That's what I always say first. I said, yeah, I know I'm here. So why are you here? I said, well, about 20 years ago, I sold cocaine. And ever since then, I've had to sit here and talk to morons like you. Oh, smart ass.
That's an insulin shot.
So I take me to the SHU. Next day, you're on the chain. Fuck, where am I going? I don't know where I'm going. But your heart's beating because you don't know, right? You don't know what happened. Did they plant some drugs on you? Did they plant a weapon on you? I have no idea, right? So I'm stressing a little bit. And then I go on a bus and I said, fuck, where am I going? And I go to Philadelphia, the FDC. So God, because the only reason you're going to an FDC that close to my prison is I'm thinking they're charging me with something. I don't know what's happening. What's going on? And I don't know. I'm waiting. And I get to the end. They like have me in this holding cell all day. And then finally I go and there's some guard says, hey, Santos, hey, I remember you were someplace else or whatever, Bikini or whatever. And he says to me, where are you going? I said, I don't know. They just locked me up. So I have no idea. And we're like, you're going to a camp. What? When you're coming down, you're going to a camp. It's like, man, you're getting out. I still had 10 years to go. Okay, you're going to a camp. I have no idea where I'm going. But camps, when you've been locked up, it's like, you're going home.
Almost free.
So they ship me out, and now I go to Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma is a transit center. And I'm just saying to myself, I'm praying. I said, God, just get me through this. Let me get to camp, sweet spot. Let me get out of there. And you're going, but I don't know who's going to be in the cell. I don't know what's going to be. And I get in there and I look in there. And I said, oh my God. I look in that cell and I see this dude. He looked like the Sasquatch, man. This dude was 6'8". His hand, I saw he looked so big. And I got to say, oh my fucking God, I'm going in there. I just got to get through this. I don't want any problem. I don't know, but I know they're looking at 45 years. And so I'm always thinking I'm getting in with another penitentiary guy or something like that. I have no idea. And I walk in. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to say, I've been in prison a long time. Don't fuck with me. So we get going and I try to say, I don't want to say I'm going to a camp. Because I don't know this dude. And so I don't know this dude. And the guy says, and where are you going? I said, well, I started in penitentiary. I'm going here, going here. And finally looks at me. I said, I just coming out of Fort Dix. I'm on my way to Colorado. And he says, Fort Dix. And he looks at me. He says, you're Michael Santos. And I said, yeah. He says, I'm on my way to Fort Dix. I read all your shit on the internet before I was going. I learned all about it. So it turns out this big guy was scared to death of when they opened the door. Turned out to be super cool. And I got to tell him all about Fort Dix when I was in the
He was a fan.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Was he going up or he was going loud?
No, he was just starting. So
starting.
He's just coming in. He read everything on the internet.
he'd known he was going in, but I'd had a website from the time I was in prison since 1998 or something like that. So I was publishing articles about prison and interviewing guys.
Right.
And that is what led my name to get out there. So people, if you were Googling at the time, you were going to find me because this was right at the start of the internet.
Right.
And so people going in would find me. And so I got to meet a lot of people that way.
And you had someone, you talk about blogging in prison, right? And it's like, how did you do that? Like, how did you, you know what I mean? It's like shooting a kite is hard enough. Like, how did you get?
So I'll tell you, Seth, that's an interesting story. So I, as Richard said, I started off in prison with this very clear idea of how I wanted to get out, right? I knew I was going to do a long sentence. I didn't believe I would do, I later learned that I could do 26 years and satisfy it because I was under the old law, but I didn't really understand it. And I learned about what's called statutory good time and extra good time and these things that were available to old law prisoners. And I remember just thinking, okay, I'm going to be 49 years old when I get out of prison. And I know the world's going to change. And I know that I don't want to have my life cut off from me. I want to have opportunities. And so I had to think, how am I going to do that? And I was inspired by people like Nelson Mandela and Malcolm X and, Viktor Frankl and people that transformed their life in prison. And they did it by learning how to develop communication skills. So that became really important to me. I didn't know how to write a coherent sentence, but it became very important to me to say, I'm going to learn that while I'm going through this journey. And so I had to learn. So I went to school and started writing to universities. And I was fortunate enough to get into school. And then through school, I started to develop mentor relationships with people that were professors at universities. And I'm reading and studying. And so as I said, I got my undergrad and master's during my first 8 years. But I still had a long ways to go. And I was in a PhD program. And then they blocked me from getting it. So when they blocked me from, pardon?
You were getting the Pell Grants, right? Taking advantage of that at the time?
I got the Pell Grant for my undergrad, but I built a big support network by the time I finished my undergrad. And then I tapped into that support network and they paid for me to get a grad degree. So I got it. I persuaded Hofstra University up in New York to admit me. And I got in and they asked me what I wanted to study. I wanted to go to law school, but I couldn't get into law school while I was in prison. So I got a master's degree and I wanted to study mass incarceration. I really believe this is the greatest social injustice of our time. And I wanted to have a role in trying to change it. And so that's what I expressed to Hofstra, and they allowed me to pursue that path. And through that, this is at the dawn of the internet. This is 1994, 1995. And I'm reading about the internet, and I really believe it's going to change the world. So, but it's like reading about playing tennis. You don't really learn how to play tennis. You can read about it. But I used to dream about the internet. What is this internet thing? I'm so excited about it. And then I just tapped into my support network and they told me about it. And I said, you start one. I want to start writing from prison and publishing. And some friends of mine launched a page, and I started writing and interviewing guys in prison and writing their stories. And it was really this idea that I had that if I can get my name out there, I'll be able to create opportunities. And that made all the difference for me in the world, not only going through prison, but when I came home, I had like a lot of opportunities opening.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Before we talk about you coming home, I'm sorry, Seth, you had something you wanted to ask?
No, it's great. You're like one of the first bloggers, like literally and one of the first bloggers that ever blogged was doing it from prison. That's a big.
I was lucky.
He was, he had inspiration for sure. You mentioned that you met your wife while you were in prison, but I also read that you were married before, and correct me if I'm wrong, and when you got into prison shortly thereafter, your then wife decided to leave you. Is that right?
Yeah. But that's part of the journey. You're doing 45-year sentence. I'm married to a super hot chick. She's 25 years old. She's not hanging out for that journey. She didn't sign up for that, right? I don't blame her.
So at the time, were you that understanding?
Well, at the time I was heartbroken. It was harder losing her than it was getting 45 years at the time. I was scared to death of being without a woman for a long time, but I was blessed. She left, I would say a year. I was in jail for a year, and she moved I lived in South Florida. She moved to Seattle, where I went to trial. She was with me for a year. And then I went to the penitentiary, and they made it difficult. It was hard. So, and they took my money, so I had no more money. Right. So
all right, but I just want to get into your emotional state and, going through that.
No, it was devastating.
Devastating. Yeah. How did you find out about this?
I called. So at the time, the phone system was different in prison, and you could call direct. You had to collect calls, but you didn't go through what they do now. So, and you could make 3-way calls then without a problem, or as much of a problem. So I kept calling her, and I wasn't getting through, which was unusual because we used to talk, but it never occurred to me that she was moving on. And then one time I called my sister and I said, I haven't gotten a hold of Gail, call her. And she patched me through, and a man answered the phone. And that was
not a good sign.
First it was I had to be the one. Julie must have dialed the wrong number. Then she called back, and the guy said again, "Oh, I'm Gail's boyfriend. It's probably best you don't call here again." And that was how I learned about it. And so it was like, that was really traumatic for a while. But then you move on, and I would say it was traumatic for a few months, but you move on.
Were you conscious of sort of not expressing your sadness, not showing tears? Were you conscious that people might take this to mean a certain thing or send out a message that you were not eager for people to see?
Yeah. One of the things, you can't go through a long journey like that and not have some influence on you. And so certainly becoming much more stoic and suppressing emotions and being hard is certainly a characteristic that accompanies a long journey in prison. And I mean, I've never gotten over that. I mean, I've been home now for it'll be 8 years in August. And that's one thing that'll stay with me, I'm sure, for the rest of my life, is I don't have the same, my wife will say I'm inhuman in that regard. I don't have that emotional intelligence, I'd say, that a normal person would. So Gail moving on, I got to be strong. My father passing away, I've got to be strong. My grandfather passing away, I've got to be strong. Because where I was, it was dangerous, and you have to live in that world. And there's not a lot of empathy for, as you said, weakness, particularly at that level. And I was young, So I was super aware of my environment and learned to adapt in that.
I went through, and last week we were talking about this, and Divine was almost reliving, the experience of not necessarily a wife or a girlfriend or a loved one or a husband, but friends who, desert you. Friends who you thought you could count on. And I'm sure you had a lot of friends. You were in the Coke business. So I'm sure there were a lot of people that wanted to be your friend when the money was flowing and the drugs were there. I found personally, certain people broke my heart. Did you go through that? Did you experience that?
I think no. I don't think so, Richard. I mean, I had to get through that, as I said, suppressing this sense of empathy in that environment. I felt that I had to get through it. I mean, one thing I said when I went in there, I knew I was dangerous, but I said, I'm going to survive. And I made that mental statement. You know, a lot of people go through prison and you hear these horror stories, but I remember in the jail said, no matter what, I'm going to survive. And so instead of focusing on, you know, maybe it's sad to say, but the truth, you know, is the truth. I said, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get through this with my dignity intact. I'm going to come back whole, and I'm going to go back to society, and nobody's going to know I served a day in prison unless I tell them. And that was my vision. And so every decision I made was on that path. And if there were people falling off to the side, I stepped right over them.
There was a cost to that, right?
Yeah, and that cost is who I am right now. It's the cost of, I can watch, 2 weeks ago, I was at a party with my family, and they were down here in Southern Cal. And I was watching my sisters just get up and dancing and watching them. And I just told them, I said, you know, I'll never be able to do that again. I don't have that sense of joy and peace. And I always feel like I'm going to get attacked. Always. Today, I always feel the government's going to come after me. I dream of prison still. You know, I dream of being taken back to prison. It's been.
What do you dream about when you dream about prison? What is the imagery?
Life. It's my life. Dealing with a guard. Are they going to take my money? Are they going to lock me up? I dream of flying out of prison. I dream of eating in prison. I dream of being apart from my wife because I'm in prison.
Michael,
you know, I dream
Michael,
all those things.
Michael, let me stop you there. It sounds like you've been traumatized by your prison experience. The length of your sentence, maybe. Are you institutionalized to any degree that you can recognize consciously?
100%. Yeah, of course. I'm telling you, I can crush it in business. I can do business out here, right? And I do every day.
Right.
But if you ask me about, am I institutionalized? Without a doubt. I don't know how to do small talk. If I'm not talking about building businesses or the journey through prison or what I'm doing, I don't have anything to say. And that's institutionalized. That's a fact.
Uncomfortable. Are you uncomfortable right now, me asking these questions?
No, this is home, baby. This is on the yard.
No, Rich, he seems pretty much smooth and easy for him.
I do this every day.
Right, I can tell.
But when I'm doing it, I'm communicating to my brothers. I'm communicating. I mean, I have a program that's in more than 200,000 people go through it a year in prison.
Let's talk about that after. Let's talk about the program. That's in prison.
That's why it's normal.
Right.
Okay. Right. It's talking about guys in prison or something else. I'm comfortable doing this.
Did you, Michael, did you have that kind of lack of empathy or whatever you're calling it right now? Like, was that there at all pre-prison, or were you like the, you know, heartfelt?
No,
you know,
I was a kid. I was, you know,
prison does
social,
yeah,
social and out every night and things of that sort.
Yeah.
That's just a fact of being in prison.
Exactly. You become this. I became desensitized. The same way about emotions. You lock them up. You don't think about it. You become desensitized. You become matter of factly. You don't take any bullshit. People can't say things to you that you know, it sounds disrespectful. You know, you ready to like smack them up.
Still feel that way, D?
It's toned down now that I've been, you know.
You feel things now. You feel pain.
I mean, certain things people say certain things certain ways. I feel like, yo, like who you trying to play or who you trying to disrespect. You know what I mean? You still have that type of.
I'm not like that in prison. I never had a single altercation in 26 years.
Well, you seem like a pretty happy-go-lucky guy.
But what I would say is I would understand who's dangerous in there.
Yeah.
Right. And I would be very selective.
Of
the people I would associate. I never gambled. I never did drugs or drank.
Smart.
I simply obsessed over what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that got me through the journey.
Hey.
We have somebody in our audience. I'm sorry, Seth, but I want to bring out Angela, and then please ask your question, Seth. Angela has has been a friend of ours for a little
Angela.
while and has
Hi.
joined
Hi,
us.
guys.
And Angela, it's very dark where you are.
Sorry,
If
let
it's
me turn the light
possible-
on.
Is it a
I
blue
tried-
light?
I tried
Is it
to
the Blue
turn
Man
If you
Group
it
show?
could, there we go.
Better?
Angela says and has some of the most insightful and deep and understanding sort of insights. And, it's really nice to meet you, Angela. And I don't know, we don't know anything about you. I don't. Could you, if you don't mind, give us like a 1 minute, synopsis on everything that makes you amazing?
Thank you. You're very kind. I'm 58 years old. I have been in trouble with the law numerous times because I don't like to drive slow. And then I did do a felony in the year
Guilty.
2000, got expunged off my record. And I went on to be a really good mother, 2 children in Redondo Beach. And then I left my husband. And then I started getting put in jail on restraining order violations. I am very aggressive verbally, and I do come off being very intense. I always have. I've had a lot of people that have worked for me going, oh my God, the heat coming off you is too much. And it's like, no, what it is you're not doing your job. So that's kind of how and I've had to learn, I use that in jail and out in the yard, especially, to get people to understand I'm not a 58-year-old grandma. Don't push me around. And you have to have that because even in women's jail in Linwood, California, and especially in Los Angeles, and especially because I don't have a career criminal, I'm not a career criminal. I am now. I'm a felon. So I'm on 4-year felony probation from Los Angeles, and I live in Toledo, Ohio, where I grew up. And then my sister took me.
How long were you down, Angela?
I was down twice. I was down from July 24th. I was arrested a week after I had a shoulder replacement surgery done. And I was there for 178 days, 22 days too long. California tort law, don't get me started. And then I went down a second time on a felony. I was arrested out of Lompoc, California by 7 Redondo Beach police officers who came up to get me because I was such a badass. And I spent roughly 5 months, and then I came out a felon on a 4-year felony probation. And I took my deal because I wanted to go home. It was COVID, and everybody was falling around. They were dropping like flies around me in that
Wow.
jail. And that was the second.
So how long have you been out?
This time I got out. They kicked me out early morning, February 12th. Said, get out. 2 o'clock in the morning. Said, sign this paper, get out. They ran me out. They ran me out of there. They ran me. They were like, let's go. Let's go. So I've had some really interesting experiences and I spent 16 days at Lucas County Correctional Center, thank courtesy of my sister, who I saw yesterday in court. And she still doesn't understand why I'm not in jail for another 6 months. So, I have a lot of empathy for people who are in jail, period. I talked to a friend of mine from CRDF today who's fighting her case. She refuses to take a deal. There are women in there much older than I am. They're in wheelchairs waiting for their day in court.
Yeah.
Just waiting.
What do you
I took
think?
my deal.
What do you think is the
Yeah.
difference, Angela, between a man and a woman going through incarceration?
None. None. Absolutely none. There were women there that thought they were men. And I respected that. They were taking testosterone shots, having gender changes. And I was like, okay, you're incarcerated. You are a human being and you're being treated like an animal. Okay. And if you get lucky and you go to the working dorm, or you get lucky and you get into a program, or you get lucky and you get accepted into the EBI dorm, it gets a little easier because you might come out with a skill set that keeps you out of jail. But a lot of people were just a revolving door. And it was so sad. It made me so sad because I thought, I got a 19-year-old girl and a 22-year-old son I have not seen for 2.5 years. They could be in jail right now. How would I know? And I wouldn't want that for them. So the amount of empathy that you feel pouring off of me is as intense as my own sense of survival. And that was, you had to balance that all day long, because as a woman, you're raised as a nurturer. Okay. And men are not raised to nurture. So you have to turn all that off. You want to go into jail.
Well, that's a difference, right?
That's a difference. That's the only difference I would say. But there are a lot of men out there that are nurturing. Like Dee was talking last week about being cut off from his entire family and all of his friends, and I could feel the pain. I could feel the pain because he wanted to nurture. He wanted to be there, and he wasn't there. You can't get in. I didn't get to watch my daughter graduate from high school. My son graduate from college. My son turned 21. My daughter turned 21. I was in jail the first time in Linwood, and I was just like, okay, I haven't heard from them in 2.5 years. What's wrong with me? I don't know. What's wrong with me? I don't know.
What did you miss, Michael? You were down for a long time. You had to miss a few things along the way, right?
Well, you certainly miss family, of course. And, you know, you miss the opposite gender, miss women.
But I meant specific events.
Well, everything. I mean, everything, birthdays, holidays, everything I missed. I mean, there was one time I had a sip of scotch when I was in there. And I remember when I sipped it, I'd been in prison for about 5 years, and somebody brought in somehow a bottle of Johnny Walker Black. And,
Wow.
and I remember him pouring it in these little styrofoam cups and passing it around to the fellas. And I remember tasting it. And when I tasted it, I had this initial sensation of memories from life before I became a prisoner. But I guess prison became my life really early. And so every day, you know, was just, this is where I live. And I hope to get out. I'm going to get out, but for now, I'm going to do everything I can to prepare myself when I get out. So I was always living with this concept of what can I do to advance possibilities for the life I want to live when I go home. And so I lived in this like alternate universe. That's how I got through.
Michael, during that time, right? Did you feel like any regret about going to trial? Did you feel you could have did it better or wiser, or just took the plea deal, or?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I made every bad decision that I could make as a young man. I mean, not only did I go to trial, I took the stand. I lied on the stand and got a charge for perjury.
Wow.
I got, while I was in prison, remember, I was charged with 848, which means I was the leader of a
kingpin.
Yeah.
I know what it is. I know 848.
And there were other people, a lot of people that were still working when I was inside, and I didn't stop it. And they kept paying me.
Oh, no, Michael. No, you didn't.
So I got indicted again.
Yeah, still a managerial role.
What?
Come on, still a managerial role.
But I'm just rolling in jail, but you know, I'm not going to stop paying me.
You like plenty of ramen noodles and mackerels.
So I was in trial, and they indicted me a second time.
Oh my God.
For the same thing, right? It was the same folks, the same people.
All right. But let me ask you, I mean, Angela said, you know, you're there and you're treated like an animal. And you said, Michael, that you just sort of, you had to, for your own survival, I guess, accept the fact that this was your life. That's the way you put it. Mm-hmm. So how did you not become that animal and sort of accept, all right, this is my lot in life. I've become the way they treat me. It's inevitable. How did you hold on to your humanity and maintain these positive plans for when you'd be getting out? God only knows when.
So really simple. I was really blessed when I was inside that county jail. And it was after I was convicted, but before I was sentenced, that a guard, the name of Officer Wilson, that I've never been able to connect with and thank, passed me a book. That book was called Plato's Republic. And I remember reading through that, and I was a terrible student in high school, so I didn't know how to read that well, but I'm reading, and I came to the story of the Crito and Socrates being in jail, and him getting this opportunity to walk out of his jail cell. And I remember it still brings chills to my head. And I'm reading this book. And when I read this story of Socrates has this opportunity to get out and go, and he says, no, I'm going to stay here. And Crito, his friend, says, well, why are you going to stay? You're going to die. And Socrates said, yeah, I'm going to die. I said, but why would you do that? And Socrates said, because I live in a democracy. In a democracy, we've got to take the good with the bad. It's a bad law. I broke the law. And I'd rather die with my dignity intact than run away like a coward for the problems that I created. And I was in the hole at the time. And I remember putting that on my chest and leaning back and thinking how I really messed up my life and saying, I'm not here like Socrates for trying to make the world a better place. I'm here for my own selfish reasons. I was selling Coke and trying to lead this fast life. And I said, that's not who I want to be anymore. And I remember that is really what taught me the art of Socratic thinking. And it taught me to start thinking about, well, I suspect people like you and people in your audience, it's, is there anything I can do while I'm in here? Anything that will cause the world to see me as something different? And that question is what guided all of my decisions going forward. It said, yeah, there's three things. I'm going to focus on education. I'm going to focus on contributing to society, and I'm going to focus on building a support network. And that's what's going to guide me through every single day in here. And it did. It got me in the beginning.
You didn't have crises of faith and confidence where you were saying, yet another guard treated you poorly and you just said, what's the use? This is who I am. Who am I kidding? You didn't go through that?
No, I always saw myself coming out strong and successful. And I didn't know if it'd be 10 years or I never believed it'd be 26 years, but it is what it is. And I just said, I'm going to do it. And so I focus on the first 10 and I set a goal. This is what's going to be my life different in 10 years. And then this is what I'm going to do in 15 years. And I was fortunate to make it through.
Yeah.
I was blessed.
We talk a lot on the yard here, and it's come up a lot as a theme too. Like everybody that's been on as a guest has had some sort of spark, right? And some people figure it out really kind of late in their biz. Some people figure it out early, and it seems like you figured it out like in county. You had that spark and that shift, right? Going, okay, that's done. This is the new, and you're creating that new thing, right? With with reading the book and building it in. How much of I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but how much of the time that you did for the rest of that time, like, can you attribute to that point, just going, oh, this is, and how different could it have been, without reading that book and having that spark early on in your time?
So there's a couple
if you hadn't read that book?
Couple pivotal moments besides Socrates. So Socrates was I'll always give credit to reading that book. Then there were others. Then there was, I got the sentence because that was before I got sentenced. Then I got the sentence and I didn't know what it meant. And then I learned it was going to be 26 years, 45 years. I knew I could do in 26 years. And so Nelson Mandela was getting out of prison around that time. And he did 27 years. So I remember reading his books and saying, how did he do it? And I remember going to the library and reading about people from the Holocaust. Because I got to read about people who've gone through struggle and how did they do it? And I read Viktor Frankl's book. And I remember reading the autobiography of Malcolm X and learning to develop my vocabulary and communicate. And they all did it from prison. And I said, I'm going to be the best that I could possibly be. So it was all these guys that taught me that said, I can do something. I remember being in my 6th year. And a guy named Gene Fisher, he was serving life. He got out. But I remember he told me about this guy, forgot his name, but he got married in prison. I remember saying, fuck, I want to get married in prison, right? And then I got married.
Accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, so I just tried to emulate leaders. And those leaders gave me hope. And I tried to tune out negativity. In every prison where I was, everyone, I heard a message. The best way to serve time is to forget about the world outside and focus on prison. Right. And I said that is the worst advice anybody can get. And anytime you hear that advice, ask the guy how it worked out for him. Because the guy who's telling you that has probably been to prison 3 or 4 times. The best way to serve time is to forget about being the guy in prison, but instead thinking about how am I going to overcome this and conquer this? And I learned that's from leaders.
That's the same mindset I took on. Like there's somebody else with a similar story as mine that's probably a little bit more high profile than I am, that wrote a book and all this other stuff. And we have very, very similar things. The only difference is he went a different way in prison and I went another way. I went a similar way that you went.
Who are you talking about, T?
Shaka Senghor. I went a similar way as you, Michael. I turned it into a a college, a education, and I could see that you did the same thing. You built on your education, and you were all about self-development, self-improvement, and I know I applaud you for that. Me and you have similarities as well. I was at Fort Dix as well.
What
I was
year?
also in Atlanta Penitentiary.
What year were you with me?
No, I wasn't with you. I was in there in 94.
Where?
In
Where in
Fort Dix.
94?
In Fort Dix.
Oh, I got to Fort Dix in 97 or something like that.
And I was also in Atlanta
Dix
Penitentiary.
alum.
I went through there, but there was also some other high profile people that went through Atlanta USP.
Right.
Marcus Garvey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Al Capone.
Were you there for that, D?
Oh,
Yeah,
hey, no.
Mr.
Speaking
Ponzi.
speaking of Al Capone,
Your
like,
boy
the
Carlo Ponzi.
the most triggering intro, right, for the yard so far, Richard, you did earlier today. I just want to throw that out there on the record with the IRS.
The tax
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, I felt
hit home,
Seth like
I don't want to
inspired
play this game anymore.
that. Yeah, Seth inspired that.
Yeah, that I take my inspiration from people who are close to me. It's very, very funny. Let me ask you a question, Mike. You've maintained obviously a very I'm sorry, Angela. Are you still there, Angela, or have you left us? Are you still here?
No, I think
I guess you left us. Michael, we talk about how awful it is in prison, and the brutality and being treated like an animal, whatever. But I, for one, I saw some of that certainly, but I also laughed a lot in prison. And I also met a bunch of characters who were a riot. And some wittingly, were funny, and others were naturally funny and, a little nutty. Did you have fun in prison at any point? What was fun for you if you did?
Yeah, I had fun in prison. I mean, I had great friends in prison, people that are still my friends. In fact, virtually all my friends are guys that I met in prison. Still,
But what is that? That's a great point. What is it about the people you meet in prison? We hear it all the time that people talk about these are the finest people you've ever come across, and you maintain these relationships. Do they become fine people because they go to prison, or were they fine people who just ended up breaking the law? Or what? But what makes this population so special that we all feel, that we've met exceptional people?
I think it's a shared experience. We've all had our lives ripped away, and we've experienced what some may construe as being the bottom, and we found a way to get through it. And we relied on each other during difficult times, and we helped each other, and we leaned on each other. And we understand each other. And so I have friends. All of my friends are people that I met in prison, and I care very much for them.
Seth, you've maintained a lot of friends from prison, right?
Yeah. I mean, I trust, like Michael said, I trust people that have gone through prison much faster than I do people that haven't, right? Because all right, you've been through the worst of the worst of the worst, and you came out of it. And one of the things that happens in prison too, that I think we can all attest to, right, is you learn to become a judge of character quickly, whether it's accurate, or inaccurate. You kind of hone that skill after a while, but you have to, because if you're hanging out and walking on a yard on the track with somebody, and that person's doing some dirt, and you're just hanging out, and they get pulled up for it, you're now on the hook for the same thing just because you're walking on the yard. So if you're not,
guilty by association.
Exactly. And if you don't become that, judge of character, then that good judge of character, then it's a different thing. But I mean, this is a shameless plug for Commissary Club, right? This is the thing that we all know, and it's bringing everybody together that's got a record and being able to connect and do all that, and with that shared experience, it's a reason why there's so much stuff. It doesn't just end at the inside, right? Once you get out, there's still challenges, you know what I mean, that are very similar for each other, for all of us at different stages of this. So that's what we're working to bring together. Shameless plug. So.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. That's our goal. Ken Apple, who's in our audience and who's been with us in the past, asked something that's a very, very good question. And it's things that we have talked about, Ken. Ken is pointing out that if you're released, typically you're out on parole or probation, which is called supervised release. And one of the terms of your conditional supervised release is that you're not communicating with or connecting with or consorting with or socializing with other people who have records. I mean, there's an incredible irony about that, in that you're coming out of prison with no money, no job, no home, no car, no clothes, no nothing, and no knowledge very often.
Idea how to do anything.
And the very people who you'd like to be able to turn to are people who've been through it, who can sort of, give you insights on how to negotiate what you're going through. And yet technically you're not supposed to be connecting with them.
You've left an important sentence off of that though, Richard. And that the rest of that sentence is without permission of your probation officer.
Right, without permission.
Because you can do it. The question is,
right,
do you have the background to be able to persuade that probation officer to allow you? Have you built that currency? I had that currency.
But let me just finish the point I'm trying to make here, if I can. We're talking about specifically our platform, where it is designed specifically to connect people, online, in the same way that Facebook does. And Ken, number one, we're aware of those laws, and the last thing we want to do is to aid and abet somebody in doing behavior that's going to get them into more trouble. And we go out of our way to let people know that this is a consideration. From a practical point of view, the government, locally as well as federally, has sort of looked upon going on social media as one of those things they can't really stay on top of, and they can't, arbitrate people's behavior online. You never know who you're talking to, et cetera, et cetera. Our goal with Commissary Club specifically is not limited to the 650,000 people who are released every year, but rather the 70 million people who may have been released 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. And that's the far bigger population that's out there. So, certainly be very, very careful. And as Michael points out, a conversation and establishing trust with your parole or probation officer can really go a long way to avoid problems down the road, and having that sort of conversation. And some will tell you, listen, don't worry about it, and thank you for telling me. And others will say, don't do it, and don't do it if that's what they're telling you to do. So we're aware of it. But again, we're after the entirety of this population, most of whom are not subject to supervised release. But, it's a whole other conversation on how you deal with supervised release, as Michael is pointing out. And I'm sure that's some of the stuff that he works with his clients on, as far as that's concerned. What, Michael, in retrospect, would you have done differently in prison, if anything? It sounds like, as they say, don't let the time do you, you do the time. And it sounds like you really took control of the time. But is there anything in retrospect in prison that you'd wish you'd done differently?
Absolutely. I wish at the very beginning I would have accepted responsibility and expressed remorse for the bad decisions I made when I was 20, but I didn't. I made, from that moment, from the day I got arrested, it was this obsessive focus of saying they'll never convict me, and I didn't do anything, and lying and lying and lying. And I definitely would have done that differently, because I knew I was guilty, of everything they said.
Right.
But it was after that After I accepted responsibility and I drew a line in the sand and I said, I am going to spend every day of my life working to reconcile with society and build my life, that was, there's nothing I would have done differently from that. I mean, I had a really easy experience in prison. I was really blessed. God was with me. I mean, wow. I went through 26 years without a single altercation, achieved phenomenal goals that transformed my life. I'm probably the only guy came out of prison and had to take a pay cut because I was crushing it in prison. Wow. And I walked out of prison with more than 100 grand in the bank and began building my life right from the start. And I was fortunate in that regard. But it was all because I read Socrates. What's that?
I'd like to get to the 100 grand. How'd you build 100 grand while incarcerated?
So it was all the strategy of building and building and building. I got my undergraduate, master's, was getting a PhD. After that, this was at the dawn of the internet. At the dawn of the internet, I'd read about it and I wanted to be a part of it. And I began investing from prison and investing in AOL and Yahoo, which were the two big names at the time.
Wow.
And just crushed it in there on that run, just leveraging and margining my way up.
Tech plays. And
then made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, but I had enough money that I could transform my life. And I netted about 100 grand in prison when I was like in my 1997, 98, that time. And then I sold everything because there was a crash and sold everything. I was left with about 100K, used that to help my wife. So it supported her. I got married in prison. She went to nursing school. And while she went to nursing school, I built a publishing company in prison. And I began ghostwriting books for white collar guys, and I would charge them. And I had a great plan on how I would set my pricing.
That was your side hustle in prison.
Yeah, here's how I did it, Devon. So I meet a guy in prison.
You're a bona fide hustler.
Huh?
I love it. You're a bona fide hustler.
Dude, check it out. This is how I set the price. I'd walk in trade. I'm listening to a guy's story. I say, dude, you got to write a book. He said, I don't know how to write. I said, neither do I, but I've written a lot of books. He'd say,
I love it, Michael. I love it, man.
Then he'd say, well, how much do you charge to write a book? I said, well, you've employed a lot of people. You're a lot of business guy, right? He said, yeah. I said, well, you have a secretary? He said, yeah. I said, what do you pay your secretary? He said, $20 an hour or something like that. I said, well, can she write your book? He said, no. I said, we know it's more than $20 an hour. And so I'd write books. I supported my wife and paid taxes.
I love it. I love it, bro.
And I'd save it. And so that's how I walked out with like 100K.
I love it, man. Well, I'm not mad at you, bro.
For some people, prison was the best place to be, I guess.
It's a good networking spot.
Congratulations. We at this point in our show, I exercise executive discretion, and I find something that's been pissing me off over the last week, and I use this as an opportunity to sort of get it off my chest so I don't have an ulcer or commit another crime. So it's what I call my rant, and I'd like to share it with you. When I was indicted, it was about 20 years ago. I was lucky. I had a good lawyer. And not only was he a good lawyer, but he was an honest lawyer, which may sound like a contradiction in terms, but that's who he was. When I first met him, I asked him, do I have a chance of getting off? And there are lawyers out there, certainly, who will, prey upon the weakness of the moment. People are petrified. They'll go anywhere for anyone who they think could help them, and they take advantage of it. And my lawyer did not use that as an opportunity to give me bad advice that would just drain my bank account, or in my case, the bank account of my loved ones. And he did not tell me that for sure you could get off. Let's take this case to trial and we're going to win. My lawyer gave it to me straight. He said, I'd have no chance in hell if I went to trial, because as he recognized, I was stone cold guilty, 20 times over what they indicted me with. And he told me the judge is going to throw the book at me if I take this court case to trial for wasting their time. He urged me to, number one, work with the prosecutor and give the prosecutor information about all the people I knew who were breaking other laws. And number two, give him the opportunity to go negotiate the best plea deal that he could get for me. I knew people who were breaking the laws and doing bad things, but as far as I was concerned, there was no way in hell that I was going to rat out other people just to save my own ass. I mean, I already felt very ashamed about my own conduct, and I knew I would never forgive myself for being a snitch. That was just something I wasn't going to do. But I did follow his advice and told him, okay, I'm going to plead guilty. And he very quickly was able to negotiate a reasonable deal, and he saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars in doing so. So I'm very appreciative of that. My case was federal, like Michael's. I later learned that 98% of all federal cases are pled out. 98%, that only 2% ever see a day in trial. So what Michael went through was truly a rarity. Now, why are so many cases pled out? Well, first of all, the feds, in this case, are known for taking years and years of putting together a case before they actually indict someone. So they could spend millions of dollars to indict someone who was charged with stealing, $100,000. It doesn't have to make business sense. They have an unlimited budget, and they really work until they have things wrapped up and have a very compelling case. But the bigger reason why so few people go to trial is because they know of what's happened to people like Michael. You know, Michael's partner in the drug business, he agreed to cooperate, and he gave up his right to a jury trial. And in exchange, he ended up getting a 4-year sentence, of which he served 2, versus Michael's sentence of 45 years, 11 times as much. Now, I don't know the particulars of Michael's case, but I assume at the time he felt like he had some kind of defense and that he would have a chance if he went through the jury trial. Federal cases tend to be much bigger cases, and there's much more money involved generally, whereas state and county cases can be much smaller. They can be a couple of $1,000s involved. Very often in state and county cases, the defendants can't afford to hire a good, dedicated lawyer. So the court appoints them a public defender to handle the case. Public defenders, they may mean well, but they often have hundreds of cases they're handling at the same time, and they can't possibly provide the same level of services that my attorney provided me. So it's not surprising that regardless of what the particulars of the case are, and keep in mind that up until this point, the defendant has never actually even been found guilty of anything, it's all presumed. The public defender will push his or her client to accept the plea deal to clear his or her own calendar, just to keep the wheels of justice moving. And at the same time, there's a young assistant district attorney who's prosecuting the case, and he or she is also pushing for this outcome. And how they do it is they threaten the defendant, who again has never been found guilty of anything at this point, that if they insist on a jury trial, they are going to seek the harshest sentences allowed under law. And if that pressure is not enough to cop a plea, keep in mind that while this has been going on, assuming the defendant hasn't made bail, he or she has been sitting, rotting away in jail, sometimes for years, waiting for a trial date. And at a certain point, the pressure to play ball becomes just too much, and even an innocent person is going to succumb to the pressure and take a deal. Now, this is not a rarity. This is how things work in our criminal justice system, sad as it is. And we'd all like to think that at the top of the system is this wise judge who takes into account not just the so-called crime that occurred, this terrible mistake that someone may have made, but presumably they're also taking into account, the ties that that the defendant has in the community, that he or she is a devoted husband and father or mother, that this person is a person of religion, for example, but it doesn't work that way. In fact, the criminal justice system is managed by 28-year-old assistant district attorneys or assistant U.S. attorneys who have dreams of either running for mayor or landing a cushy job as a partner at some white shoe law firm, pulling down $1 million a year. He or she is someone who's trying to make his or her bones by showing off a one-sided conviction record that proves just how tough they are on crime. There's very little justice in a criminal system when expediency and raging ambition determine the future lives of defendants and their families and their communities. And there's very little justice in the presumption of guilty until proven innocent. And there's even less justice when those that suffer are overwhelmingly economically disadvantaged people of color. And that's the way it is. And that's my rant, and I'm sticking with it. So, Michael, tell us, please, after I got that off my chest, you're doing amazing stuff now. Since you've been out of prison, what are you working on? What's important to you these days?
Well, thanks so much, Richard, first of all, and everybody on the yard in your community. I think you guys are doing a great thing by helping more people become aware of the injustices in our system and what we as Americans can do to fix it. It's, kind of what I do still. I create digital content that I distribute to people inside of jail and prison with hopes of teaching and inspiring them, giving them strategies that they can use to emerge successfully. I'm in a lot of prisons, but in addition to that, now I've got a business that I'm building, I'm super excited about, and that's helping more small and medium-sized business owners understand how decisions they make on the job can lead them into a government investigation or potentially charges for white-collar crime. So it's a new business I'm building called Compliance Mitigation. I've got a national television commercial running right now that I'm super excited about, and I'm just building leads and closing deals. So working every day, using the journey of 26 years in prison as instead of something I have to hide from, it's always a strength for me. And I provide jobs for formerly incarcerated people who have developed the skill set to communicate. Everybody on my team, in fact, the motto of our company is, we did the time so you won't have to. So
that's a great motto. Well, Adrian has put a link up to Michael's company, Prison Professors, prisonprofessors.com. Check it out. This guy is a force of nature, needless to say, and it's just no telling what you're going to accomplish, given what you were able to accomplish while you were in prison. It's much easier to be a superstar now, and you're doing it, and great stuff lies ahead. So congratulations, really.
Thanks to everybody for having me back on the yard. I appreciate it, and wish you guys all the success in the world.
Thank you. Divine, any last words, D?
Nah, man, I'm impressed with you, man. You keep doing what you're doing, continue your journey, man.
Where are you, D?
You echoed a lot of what I'm about, how I think.
Where are you? What city are you in?
Huh?
What city are you in?
I'm in Rhode Island right now. Providence, Rhode Island.
Oh, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
I was in jail with your mayor, buddy.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, oh, buddy there. It's an Italian thing. It's an Italian thing. But yeah, Seth, keep doing what you're doing, brother.
Seth, any last words?
Yeah, Michael, it was great, man. It's great getting to chat with you on the yard, man. It's great seeing all the stuff you're doing now. Thanks for sharing your experience, and a lot more blessings to come for sure.
Thanks. Sure. Thanks to you. Thanks to you, Richard. Thanks for your audience. I recognize some of the names, and God bless all of you, and I wish everybody success and peace and safety.
Thank you. So everybody, number one, please check out Commissary Club, commissary.club. We're coming out in a couple of weeks with a brand new, very cool mobile-only app that's going to blow you away. We'd love to hear what you think about it, so look for that. For those of you who want to support the work we're doing, we are a for-profit company. We're currently in the middle of a crowdfund campaign on republic.co, and find us, Commissary Club, there. In my opinion, this is an opportunity to get a great return while also doing massive social good. So please check that out if you're inspired. Next week, we have a pretty amazing person who's joining us by the name of Freeway Rick Ross. Freeway Rick Ross in the 80s was the largest drug dealer, cocaine specifically, in LA. He was responsible for moving tons of cocaine and with billions of dollars in revenue out of that. And his story is pretty amazing. So we're looking forward to that. Plus other very cool guests that we'll be having here in the near future. So please watch, tell your friends. In a moment, there'll be a screen that has our contact info for me and Divine and Seth, as well as Adrian. If you'd like to be a guest on the yard, or you know someone, the one stipulation is that they've done time. But if you or someone you know would like to join us, we'd love to hear about it. And ultimately, our message to people with records is we got to look after each other, and we got to help each other. And God knows nobody else is going to help us if we don't help ourselves. You know, let's be there for one another. Let's provide inspiration to others. Let's be a role model like Michael has been, and keep working at that. And let's stay the fuck out of prison so we could be doing this on the outside. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week for the yard. Have a great night, everybody.